Two men journey to the bars and restaurants of Scandinavia to find amazing beers, always with the same question.
Hey, what's on tap?
It's time to find out.
Welcome to What's on Tap podcast. I'm your host, Stefan.
I'm your host, Martin.
And today we have something we haven't really done in a long time, because it used to be that in kind of the early years we would do a cellar dive and just talk about like cellaring beers and what kind of beers you should cellar and what kind you shouldn't and how long you should cellar them for and things like that. We haven't really done that in a while, but you got your hands on a couple of, I would say, not just cellared beers, but beers that time forgot.
Yes. So thanks to local Malmo godparents of beer, and Thomas and Lena Lindhoff.
Friend of the show. They've actually been on Thomas has been on the show before.
Yep. So Thomas is the previous chairman or president or whatever you want to say of the local beer association Malte, and he's a former president of the Swedish Beer Consumers Association, so the lobby organization for beer consumers and not producers.
Yes.
And he's done some really good work there. And thanks to them, I got two really old Swedish beers from 2002 and from 2003, when Swedish craft beer was in a very sorry state.
Well, I think the craft beer industry was really finding its feet at that point. I mean, not even finding its feet; it was in its primordial infancy of trying to establish itself. Because, I mean, even in the early 2000s in the U.S., there really wasn't a craft beer movement. We're still talking like 10 years before the craft beer movement even really starts to take off and become something.
Yeah, but when people mention the American craft beer revolution, they like Sierra Nevada and Anchor and stuff. Isn't that the 70s that those beer breweries are started, and then they just struggle forever?
Well, like Anchor Steam has been around for a really long time.
Yeah.
New Belgium's been around for forever, and then there were other kind of offshoots like Red Hook and some breweries that had been around for a while that were bought up by Coors and AB InBev and the other Molson and things like that. So you could say there's always been, there was a craft beer scene in the mid 90s when I was living in Tennessee, but it was still, it was really super regional. And if you were like, oh, this is a craft beer was at that time was like Negra Modelo or something that wasn't Anheuser-Busch or Coors product was seen as kind of like a craft beer kind of thing. So I mean, sure, maybe you could have gotten a Lawnmower Ale from St. Arnold's out of Texas, but Shiner has been around for forever as well, but I mean, you aren't really seeing export out of the regional market that they were made in. So
no. And in Sweden, the 80s and the 90s were a desolate wasteland where beer nerds, if they wanted to drink something local, they would need to go there and find that little brew pub that would quit existing in a few years because the market didn't support it.
It was even more difficult than that, because you people that aren't from Sweden don't maybe know the history of the Systembolaget, where it's not like a shopping experience where you go in and wander the aisles finding the alcohols that you need. No, you had a ticket, and then you would go up to the counter and you would tell them what you wanted, and then they would go behind the counter and then they would find it and then bring it out.
Yes.
So
you needed to look in the catalog beforehand to even know what you could potentially order.
Right. And if you just didn't know what you were looking for, even though something was available, there was no way to be discovered or even found. So it was, the fact that, there was even a quote-unquote craft beer scene at that time is still, quite frankly, amazing, because I don't know how that anything that wasn't a standard lager was even kind of discovered or found back in those days.
Exactly, and that's why there is a risk that these beers will be dusty, past their prime. The stout actually has a best before 2013 on it,
Yeah.
but they are a part of Swedish craft history. Both Nils Oscar still exists, I think,
Yes.
in its original
the Nils
configuration.
Oscar has it best before 2007.
Oof.
May 2007.
That's quite pessimistic to have a 5-year date on a barley wine.
Yes. Well, to be fair, it's not a super high ABV barley wine.
So Slottskällan, they went out of business. We're drinking beer from 2003. In 2006, they changed all of their labels, and then in like 2012 or 13, I think they went out of business. And now someone else has bought the Slottskällans name. I don't remember who, but they're also an Uppsala brewery. Or maybe it's even like Västerås coppersmiths that bought
Could be.
the Uppsala name. I don't know, but this is OG original Slottskällan.
Yeah.
They fought for the Swedish craft revolution. Are we starting with the stout?
Yeah, I think so. It's 9% stout. It's old as AF.
Yeah. So it poured very uncarbonated, but it had a little lining of foam, and when I agitate it, it actually gives me a super thin little.
Yeah, you get a little carbonation ring right around the edge of the glass, which is kind of nice. Smell-wise, it just
malt and dust.
a little raisiny maybe.
Raisiny,
but,
yes.
Yeah, but there's not a lot there. So very, very curious about this.
Let's try
Let's jump into this.
Cheers.
Well, I will say, knowing Thomas and Linda and how they treat and store their beers, this is outside of a climate-controlled, temperature-sensitive vault of some sort where they store beers. Their cellaring is probably about as good as you can get.
They take good care of everything they put in a cellar. These ones, I think they cellared it and they then forgot it.
Probably put in the cellar in a box in a corner and behind something, and surprisingly, this is pretty damn good.
It's pretty good. It has a lot of raisins and dates and those kind of dried fruits.
Yeah, this is surprisingly drinkable. I mean, I am shocked at how good. I mean, if you were to tell me it was a stout, I wouldn't get that if you were to blindfold me and have me try it, because it doesn't have a lot of stout characters. The mouthfeel is extremely light and refreshing, almost kind of in a Baltic porter kind of way.
You definitely get why it's past its expiration date. Because, as you say, it no longer really tastes like Imperial Stout.
But it also tastes better than a lot of stouts I've tried recently too. So that's just throwing me off here. It's like, I mean, okay, sure, it's a 20-year-old stout, great, but at the same time, almost 20. Well, almost 20 years old, 18-year-old.
18.
Yeah, it's still better than a lot of stouts I bought off the shelf recently.
That is pretty sad. Then it's even more sad that they closed their shop and then sold their brand. So when I became a beer nerd in 2007, this particular beer, this exact beer, but in the new labeling, is what I started my cellar with. I bought 5 of the 2007. I bought 5 bottles of the 2008, 9, 10, etc. Then I realized why I'm not widening my cellar. I'm just drinking a lot of beers. I should deconstruct this. And me and some friends, we drank those bottles. Some had aged nicely, a few years. Some, meh.
So, what made you want to get the Slottskällans?
For the show?
No, not for the show, but just like, why was this the beer that you chose to be the one that you collected at that time?
2007, stouts on the shelf of Systembolaget were rare. You could get 4 or 5, and several of those were very limited releases that you realized you're not gonna get this next year.
Yeah.
This is a one-off, and the bottles had the year on the label. For this beer, the old label, Old Slottskällans, we had to do some research because we had the best before date, but we didn't have a brew date. We had mystical numbers that could mean different things.
True.
So we went back and we saw that Slottskällans actually started putting the vintage on this stout years after this bottle was made, which is even more fun. So we knew that it couldn't be 5.
Right.
It couldn't be 5 or later. It could be 4. It could be 2. But then the best before them having a 10-year best before makes so much sense with the other numbers we can find on this number stamping. So it being a 2004, which is theoretically possible, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, I think we're going to say 2003. Feeling fairly confident that's the actual.
Very confident. I have. This one is so difficult to rate.
Actually, I'm going to give it a 3.75.
That's nice.
I think it's quite nice. Like I said, better than most of the stouts I bought off the shelf recently. It's held up, I think, pretty well. It's still extremely drinkable. I quite enjoyed it.
I will give it the same. Actually, a strong 3.75.
Yeah, I think so
just
too.
because of the risk of it not being good.
Well, I will say the Slottskällans was extremely risky. The beer I'm more dreading is our second one.
Ooh.
Because I found that, because what we have now is a Nils Oscar Barley Wine from 2002. Comes at 9.5% ABV. And the problem I've had with barley wines aging out is they turn into like a wintergreen, pepperminty kind of flavor. And that just, for me, it just means it's just gone bad. It's not drinkable anymore. And when I look at the cap on this, there's a bit of a weird sediment on the cap.
Wow.
So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. But the color is definitely barley wine-ish.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks great.
And Nils Oscar is still around.
Yeah, they have been around for forever, and they're still putting out beers of decent quality, I would say. I mean, they're never going to be your go-to, but if you have a Nils Oscar, you're not going to be disappointed usually. No. It's going to handle the feet. There's a little bit of carbonation on this. Very, very slight.
It's possible to agitate.
Yeah, you're getting more carbonation than I am.
I actually am.
But yeah, it still looks like there's some life in it yet. But let's dig into this.
It smells. It basically doesn't have an aroma at all.
I get raisins and dates and kind of flavors off of
sugar.
But yeah. Wow. Again, surprisingly good. There's a nice depth of flavor here.
I'm not getting the peppermint that you dreaded.
Not at all. Not at all. There's a lot of character going on here. I get caramel. There's some dates. There's a really nice roundness to the overall flavor.
This is some fun beer archaeology.
Yeah. I get maybe slightly orange or citrus in there as well. Like a candied kind of orange peel.
Yeah, it's some kind of candy.
Yeah.
The fun thing about beers this old is they are completely devoid of hops.
Oh,
I mean, there's zero hop character.
No. And that was like, what surprised me about it was there was this kind of light citrusy note on the front end that I was completely don't know where it's coming from and did not expect. Do you sense it as well, or am I just like kind of a little crazy?
I'm trying to sense it.
It's right at the front. It's like right when you take a first sip.
I'm more tasted as sweet candy.
Yeah.
Like very sugary candy. I'm not getting the citrus, but I'm definitely not saying you're wrong. I mean, for anyone still listening to this weird, incoherent rambling, it is very difficult. I find it very difficult to isolate flavors in beers that are this subdued. It's very. You're correct that it has layers and depth, but it is difficult to kind of pick them out. It's not a flavor bomb like a pastry stout or
I think that's what makes it interesting is that, because again, this beer is right around 20 20 years old as well.
19 years.
19 years old.
Depending on when this episode is aired.
So this beer is legal to drink in Sweden. Both these beers are legal to drink in Sweden.
They can vote.
Yeah. And they're both aged out incredibly well. I mean, I've had beers that have not aged nearly as well as these in a much shorter time, in like 4 or 5 years, much less, you know.
Definitely. I think one part of it is just that Thomas and Lena Lindhoff have actually cellared these wonderfully.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for the privilege to have gotten my hands on these. But also, I think both breweries had a quality mindset. They wanted, even back then, these were never the flavor bombs of today's craft beer. Look at me. They wanted to put out quality product consistently, and I think that makes them more cellarable.
I think that's also why things like Penapot and Old Thomas age really, really well.
Yeah.
I mean, when you drink them up front, they're like, it's okay, it's a decent beer. But then when you cellar them for, 5-10 years, then they become like this much more rich, exciting experience.
You mean Thomas Hardy?
Thomas Hardy, yeah, Thomas Hardy.
Old Thomas, because we're talking about Thomas Lindhoff. He's not old.
No, that's what I meant. No, I meant
Thomas, oof.
Sorry, Thomas Hardy. I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
Are we doing personal attacks now?
Yeah.
No, we're not. But yes, because those brewers have focused on like a longevity of quality. But that just makes my mind blown when Nils Oscar puts a 5-year best before on a barley wine that obviously still has qualities 19 or something years later.
Yeah, but then again, it was also, I mean, you gotta remember that best before dates are arbitrary at best. I mean, they're just a number you put on something as whatever, they put something on there. And I mean, they could have put 2009 or whatever, but it's good. It's really, really good.
In the aftertaste, there is this like dusty, caramelly flavor.
I don't get dusty. I get a little more medicinal.
Maybe that's
flavor to it.
Maybe that's a better word for what I mean.
But I think for me, the light citrus orange peel note is becoming a little more prevalent as it gets a little more air. I am quite impressed by this. I'm going to give this a 4.25.
Wow.
It's really, really, for a beer I was expecting to maybe consider a drain pour. I am just blown away by how good this beer is. That
is exceeding my hopes and dreams for this particular episode. I wanted us to get I actually went into this episode thinking we might bash these beers, but we will say, oh, it's been an experience.
It has been.
It still has been.
I mean, how often are you going to just sit down on a random weekday and then have a 18, 19-year-old beer? You know, it's. So what do you give this?
Definitely a 4, maybe strong 4. Maybe I'm approaching your 4.25. I don't know. I like the barley wine slightly better than the stout.
I like the barley wine much better than the stout.
The stout we rate highly basically because it held up so well. It's getting some bonus points because I expected it to fare worse.
Honestly, if you have the barley wine and then you try the stout again, you get a little bit more of a chocolate character to it.
You actually do, which is impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I just like, that's a new note I didn't expect, and it could be because of the flavoring and the barley wine is bringing out a different combination on your taste buds. But I mean, I'm really glad you got these beers. I'm really glad that you decided to bring a couple of them on the show.
Thank you, Thomas and Lena.
Thank you, Thomas and Lena. This has been an excellent experience. So you can find us online at what'sontappodcast.com, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, And wherever you can
Spotify.
find Spotify.
You keep forgetting
Spotify. I always forget Spotify. Because you know what I think? I think SoundCloud. I think that's we're never on SoundCloud.
We're not on SoundCloud.
I don't know why I always think that, but it's Spotify.
That's just rappers who want to make it big.
Someday. I'll get there.
So until next time.
Keep drinking, you dum-dums.